This talk is called Demystifying Capture the Flag Competitions. And Barrett Darnell is our speaker, who you're obviously very familiar with at this point. I gave thanks to him yesterday by saying that the curriculum CTF that we've been running over the last couple of days wouldn't have happened without his help. He has a ton of experience with running the Red Team Village at DEF CON and Cactus Con and other places. He's been just a huge asset to SANS and a great partner. He's stepping up and taking over lead authorship of the red teaming course that I talked about a bit earlier. He recently became a certified instructor. He's one of our very few people who can teach SEC 660 on advanced pen testing and exploit writing. In fact, he's teaching that this week. He's an officer in the U.S. Air Force and was on some very elite teams. So very respectable man. Barrett Darnell, come on up. Round of applause.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's been a bit since I've seen you. So you've heard a lot of references to CTFs. We're kind of end capping this event, this last talk, before we go and close it out, talking about CTFs. It's a tool that I've used a lot to train myself and train others. This talk is geared towards folks that are maybe a little apprehensive about jumping into a CTF, which is very reasonable because CTFs, they range in so many different styles, difficulty levels. There was a lot of hard challenges we had in ours. If you join NetWars, NetWars is designed to start you off, as a beginner, give you lots of hints and start building through that. Sometimes you might join a CTF and it's just insanely hard and you get discouraged and you never come back. So what I'm going to talk about is, what is a CTF? We've talked about it so often. I think, everyone on the call here knows. I'm going to talk about different styles you're running to, challenge types, the technical skills that you would need to build in order to be competitive, as well as the non-technical skills, which can be just as important. And then if you're ever going to, cement the knowledge that you've gained, you need to spend some time afterwards. If you just got done with the CTF and you're probably exhausted because you haven't stood up in 8 hours and you're hungry and you have a headache, you need to find some time to go back, go through your notes, go through any of the files you've collected, save those off, because you are probably going to flush that out of memory real quick. And so same thing if you're doing an assessment, right? When you're done, you have to write that report. And so you need to go back and make sure that you retain that knowledge. So who am I? I'm a SANS certified instructor. I teach SEC 660, which Steve mentioned just a second ago. I'm working on the new Red Team course. Previously, I was working for Bishop Fox. I was the managing senior operator for the CAST platform, Continuous Attack Surface Testing. It's now called Cosmos. And I just left Bishop Fox about a month ago, just taking a little hiatus, focusing on the Red Team course. I want to get that out soon. And I take a lot of pride in the CTFs that I run, making sure they don't break. And so, I definitely want to make sure that everything's very tight with the network that I'm designing for the Red Team course. Before that, I was very fortunate. I was in the Air Force for 12 years. I went to college at Washington State University. I started off as a communications officer, but I was a little bit different because I went down to special operations at Herbert Field. And it's actually funny, I talked to some of the military folks here, and a lot of like cross paths, different places that we've been. But I was in special operations for 8 years. Then I went to Fort Meade to the 315th, and even though I was a senior captain there, I really wanted to be technical. I have 2 degrees in computer science, and I talked my way against all odds to go to a very hard course where I was able to pass that, get on the floor, and become a certified operator and also a trainer. And it's about that time where I really got into CTF. So this is about 2015. Like I said, I use it as a tool for myself because I would learn skills playing a CTF that I would then use in real life. I would learn things in real life that I would then use in a CTF. Also, I was a military instructor. I love teaching. I get a lot of joy out of that aha moment when I see students, working through something and they get it, especially with exploit development. It's not easy, but when you get someone who has not looked at assembly too often, and you get them to write a buffer overflow and it works, and you see the look on their face, it's all worth it. I put notable wins here because hey, why listen to me about CTFs? My white whale that I haven't quite caught is a DEF CON black badge. I came in second twice, not at the main DEF CON CTF, but some of the other ones, IoT CTF, capture the flag, but if you're not first, you're last. So no black badge, but net worth, I love net worth. I was fortunate to be on a cool team with OXDF and IFSEC and a few others. We won 3 times in a row. It was 2019. Then we all flew to Germany. We won the European Tournament Champions. Then we came back, and then Steve told me I can't play anymore. So a couple styles. One thing that I really like. So for my own personal reasons, and especially because working offensive security, doing red teaming and pen testing, I like story-based or scenario-driven. So what Simon was showing yesterday, where it kind of mimicked a pen test, I like that because there's a lot of applicability there. But what you're going to see more often, you're going to see Jeopardy board style. That's what we had with the offensive operations CTF. With Jeopardy board, like the show Jeopardy, you have a number of different categories, and those categories will be based around many different things, but you can work on one a piece at a time. Maybe there will be a stream where you start it and there'll be 4 or 5 challenges in that stream, but it's displayed like a Jeopardy board and you can bounce around. The nice thing about that is if you have a story-driven or scenario one and you get stuck, you might not be able to progress any further. With Jeopardy, if you get stuck, it's a really good idea to just take a break, walk away, get some fresh air, and come back and try a different challenge. Attack and defense is fun. Attack and defense is very hard to build, and it's very hard to find attack and defense styles that are built well. Normally, the way these run is you will get a vulnerable VM or a few vulnerable VMs, and all the competitors or the competing teams will get these. So SANS NetWars level 5, you get a Windows VM and a Linux VM. They have 4 vulnerabilities each, and everyone immediately, as fast as they can, you start looking at the services that are there, and you try to figure out what those issues are, and you patch them, and in the process of patching them, you also figure out, well, how am I going to exploit this? And so it's a race to weaponize that exploit, to apply your patch, and then attack the other teams. When that happens, you need to just have a lot of skills and just administrative skills. That talk 2 talks ago, when we were looking at the supercomputers, right, there was a lot of just basic Linux admin skills needed in order to write those exploits and kind of understand what's going on in the system. And so that's that's an important skill. King of the Hill is where there are a number of vulnerable targets, and your goal is to take over a target, lock everybody else out, and continue to get the score on that. And so those can be very frustrating because if you're going against someone really good like IFSEC, he will have that thing locked down and he'll hold it the whole rest of the time. And so you keep collecting those points. Types of challenges. Cryptography is sometimes a loose term when you see that in a CTF, but things to understand different implementation faults with cryptography, or if you might see a challenge where it's simply they'll give you parts of a formula, like parts of an RSA formula, and see if you have the knowledge to fill in the math, right? Or a really important cipher that shaped the world is the Enigma machine, right? And the way that it works, kind of having that knowledge, you can do a challenge based off of it. The Enigma machine was the encrypting device in World War II that the Germans used. Exploitation, that can either be just throwing a commercial off-the-shelf exploit at a computer, at a system, and then getting a shell and working through there, or it can be where you get some of that information. So like binary exploitation will give you the binary, you reverse it, you go through and you try to weaponize that issue, and then you will then throw that exploit remotely. And there's also some things you have to take into consideration when you throw it remotely. It might work locally just fine, but things might be a little bit different. And so the flag will be on that remote system. The way to get it is to successfully attack it. Forensics is very fun and can also be very frustrating. There's like Boss of the SOC and a couple of those where there's just a ton of data to wade through. Programming, you'll be asked to do some silly task. And really the only way to kind of get through there is to script it out. So for example, I might have a thing where you connect to it and you're presented in ASCII like a Pac-Man map, and you have to complete it in a second, right? The only way you're going to do that is with some scripting. You take in all that data, you start using graph theory to figure out every single possible path until you get the right one. Then you submit that sequence in order to complete the path. And then I keep throwing those at you. Mobile, you don't see that often, but you do see a lot of APKs out there, because reversing APKs, there's some good tools to help you out. ICS and OT, you don't see a ton of those. I know that Scythe/Grim, they have the Howdy Neighbor CTF, where they have a lot of ICS, like kind of emulation that you can work on. Sometimes with the OT ICS ones, it might just be a packet capture. Reverse engineering, that, maybe that is the binary exploitation. Maybe it's just, hey, there's a flag somewhere in here, and when you reverse it, you'll learn about it. Trivia, puzzles, self-explanatory. Web is what you're going to see the most of. One, because like web is the biggest attack surface out there. Two, web is really easy to build a challenge on, and web is full of issues. And so like if you go to any of the sites we've talked about, any of the services, you're just going to see a lot of web challenges. Web is not my favorite, because I like the other stuff. I like the low level stuff, and I like to traverse networks. Web, like if you're a bug bounty guy, web is web is your thing. Cloud, you see some of that, but it's kind of scary as a author to write a cloud one, because you don't want to make a mistake where now they take over that account and they start doing malicious things. And cloud can get really complex. So let's talk about some of the technical skills, tools, and techniques. This is not all encompassing, obviously, but going back to why I like doing these. So with any of these challenges, I remember years ago, over a decade ago, I took a class from Bryce Galbraith, and I think it was GSEC, and he said this quote that I'll never forget. And he said, the thing about this field is you might do that recon, get a banner, you match it with an exploit, you throw the exploit, and you see your little prompt, right, turn into a root prompt, and you've got access. But now the question is, what do you do from there? So you have to have some of these basic Windows and Linux skills in order to take advantage of the access you have. If you are at the point where you know cat and type and you get the flag and you leave, that's great, but that's hard to then utilize that in a red team exercise or a pen test. So the better you are at just using Windows and using Linux, that's going to help out a lot. Let me go back a second and talk about why I think CTFs are valuable for learning and training. We mentioned before, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, you kind of get to a point where you're going through the motions. It's only when you're in an uncomfortable or new situation that you really learn. CTFs, I think, are great because in your day-to-day, you might not have those instances come up where you have to be out of your comfort zone, go and rapidly research something, and then apply it. Maybe that'll happen here and there, depending on what you're doing. But with the CTF, it's happening every minute. Every minute, you're going to look at something weird that you might not have any experience with. A certain Java, framework, or maybe an operating system that's super rare. And so you get put into that uncomfortable situation with the task, and now you're going to have to go out and rapidly research, try to learn as fast as you can. Go look at write-ups. Go look at RFCs. Go look at manuals. And you're forcing yourself in that cycle of learning. So that's why I like that. And so if you use your Windows system for the core things that you do, but you're not doing all these one-off things, you have to really force yourself to increase those skills. A CTF will make that happen. Infrastructure is important. If you are a pen tester or a red teamer, your infrastructure is very important. And so you need to have some defensive skills to make sure that some blue teamer isn't scanning you and making fun of you on Twitter, right? You have to make sure that your infrastructure and your troubleshooting ability are very keen so that you have success. Basic networking skills are very important. I used to joke with some of my friends because oftentimes you show up at a CTF in a conference like this, you're a little, you're a little sketched out about the Wi-Fi. There's no cell reception because we're in a basement. And so you're sitting there and you're dual homing things, right? You set up your host system to connect to some sort of outbound internet, right? And then there's the CTF network where the challenges are. And you have to dual home that. And so knowing how to pass that connectivity down to your Linux VM, knowing how to set up routing tables between your own machines and then the situation you're in. I used to always joke like, well, hey, you can't hack if you don't know basic networking, right? Like, I know you're trying to throw this exploit, but you can't even get packets to go in the right way. So that's that's a very important skill. And then scripting. If you sit there and you spend a long time doing a task, it might come up again. Something that you might see a lot is data exfil using a number of techniques, whether it's like load into ICMP or the payload of DNS packets, and you'll fire up a script. You'll write this script that'll take all the DNS payloads, carve them out, and then maybe it's base64 encoded or some other stuff. You don't want to have to go through that process of those basic parts over and over and over again every time you see it. Because you will see things like that over and over again if you play a lot of CTFs. So you want to be good with scripting. You want to have good data management to be able to go back to some of those scripts. So a couple of technical vignettes. So Hopelessly Broken CTF is an IoT CTF run by the IoT Village. Loved that CTF for the purpose of how they designed it to make it difficult. Has anybody here played the IoT CTF? If you're from this area, they host it a lot here. Usually it's B-Sides, DC, B-Sides Charm. They also hosted at DEF CON. So the reason I really like that one is, as I mentioned before, pivoting through a network is an important skill. And usually it's an advanced skill. If you're a bug bountier, depending on your level, you might just stop right after that initial access because that's what the ROEs are. But if you're a pen tester or a red teamer, pivoting is very important. So with this one, it's kind of a showcase for the a company called ISC, Independent Security Evaluators, and they write a bunch. They have a lot of CVEs, and they write these exploits. So then they take all of these devices and they have them up in the room, and it's just you go to exploit DB and you throw the exploit, and boom, you have a show. So how do you make that hard? You start doing crazy routing where you are trying to pivot through 4 vulnerable wireless routers to get to the other one. And so each router will have a different architecture. Each router will have a different set of services, different binaries that are available. Maybe your first hop is SSH, but then your next hop might be something else. Maybe you have to bring your own binaries. And so that one I really liked because of the type of work that I was doing and the type of folks that I was training. Pivoting was one of the key skills. And so, what did that force us to do? We wrote a rootkit for one because we wanted to be able to maintain control, because when you go to DEF CON, the other players aren't very nice, right? They don't care if the rules say don't mess with other players. They're going to mess with you. If they see you on a box, they're going to disconnect you, even though that's not the goal. And so, we spent some time working on a rootkit. I wrote a Flask application. Never wrote a Flask application before, so I had to learn that. When we did that, the whole point of doing it was I wanted a team web site that we could all log into to communicate, and then that system would go out and it would scan all the IoT devices, and then it would do some targeting where it would see the banner and it would just automatically throw the exploit, because speed's important in CTF. So I had to learn Flask, and that was me dipping my toes into Flask. Cross-compiled binaries, SOCAT, NetCat, any of these tools. You don't know what sort of architecture is going to be on that IoT device. It could be ARM, it could be PowerPC. There's so many of them. So having a little inventory, a little tool bag of all of these useful tools that are cross-compiled, that's a necessary thing. And so, if I'm doing that all to play a CTF, then I'm keeping that tool bag if I ever have to do an assessment where there's an IoT device. Also, so pivoting, malware reverse engineering. So I spent the last 7 years just focused on offense. dip my toes, taking a couple Defender classes and really trying to understand the tools and the techniques that the defenders are using. One thing that's applicable across the board is doing some rudimentary reverse engineering of malware. So CTF, they might give you a piece of malware and say, hey, you have to reverse this. If you land on any kind of target in a real life assessment, you're going to want to know, is there anybody else there? Are you cohabitating? You're also going to want to know, what services are there? Is there already malware there? Usually that's a pain if you're a pen tester and you land on a customer's box and there's already malware there, because now that derails your whole thing. But how are you going to know there's malware there? You're going to start a little mini investigation. You're going to say, hey, SCV host, that's weird. Let me look at that. Okay, and then you start going through using on-system tools to try to figure out, is this talking out to the net, out to the internet? Is it doing things that are inconsistent with what it's trying to pretend to be? And so that's a skill that you can pick up in a CTF because there are a lot of RE challenges. Non-technical skills. I think these are sometimes more important. There's a lot of very brilliant people out there that focus on the technical and not the non-technical. And if you are ever working in a team, if you're in a bigger organization, these skills, I would say, are sometimes more important. It's great to have an all-star on the team that can do all of it, but if they can't work with others and they can't communicate, you're a little limited in what you can use that person for. So creativity, that goes without saying. As a CTF author, you can either make something very, very esoteric and make players upset, or you just find there was a recent vulnerability, the Apache vulnerability. I think it was either I think it was command injection, wasn't it? The one that just came out. But you can take something that just came out and you can create a puzzle around it, where you build a fake website and then you want to exercise that skill to identify that vulnerability and then go after it. And so the person who's making the challenge is going to be creative. They're not going to make it so simple that you just take something off the shelf and throw it. They're going to make it, the situation or the environment, a little bit different. So you have to be creative in trying to think, like what's happening behind the scenes, which I think is a very important skill when you're talking about pen testing or red teaming, because you might throw an exploit and it fails and you don't know why. It's like, well, this always works. You have to be creative in how that path might be there. Maybe there's a WAF that's breaking it. Maybe there's a security product, on the system that's eating up your payload. Persistence. We have a heap exploitation challenge that's 1,000 points. 2 people in the CTF solved it, and that was the offensive operations CTF. Things like that are complex. It's 1,000 points because it's hard, and if you don't have the persistence to work through that, building a ROP chain takes time, it takes skill, and you have to be persistent when it fails and it fails and it fails. So important life skill. Resiliency. Not getting turned off by the fact that it's not working the first time. That's, again, an important life skill. Let me spend a lot of time focusing on these last few. The note taking, I talk about all the time with everybody. I don't think that there's a more valuable skill than note taking, and I call it a skill because in the heat of the moment, and whether you're doing an assessment or a CTF, it's really easy to ignore the fact that you should be keeping notes. But if you're on assessment, of course you have a report to write, and so before you can write that report, you're going to want to go through the last week or 2 weeks and try to be concise about everything. And having good notes is going to be very helpful. Time stamping those notes so that you know exactly when things happen. Because if the SOC comes back and they say, "Hey, you crashed this server in prod, and we're really mad about it," and then you say, "Well, hey, I have really good notes here, and no, that wasn't me. I'm sorry that happened, but that wasn't me, and I can prove it." That's helpful. If you are delivering, if you're doing an engagement, right, and we're trying to detect, we're trying to test the blue team's detection, right? We want to show them like what we did when we did it, because then they can go back through their logs to see if they detected it. You know, maybe that didn't trigger an alert, but they want to see if we logged. Logging in general, so taking a packet capture from your system, just so you know all the traffic that you've spit out. Sometimes you will take a look at, you'll be in a situation where you think everything should work just fine, but you don't really see the answer to what the problem is until you look at a packet capture. You know, are things on the wire how I think that they were? So logging all of your traffic is important. You know, outbound proxies, logging all your web requests, proxy logs if you're using Burp, right? You should have all of your tools proxy through Burp so that you have a nice good log of it. And then when you're done analyzing that data, maybe you just tar it up and you save it for later. But you know, there's a lot of goodness in those logs. Preparation and practice. You do have to practice. So I believe the first place player for the CTF, and we'll announce that in a little bit. They are part of a team. They're part of a team where their hobby is CTF. Their jobs are their security folks in a number of roles, but you will see that they play CTFs all the time, and they win all the time. I was kind of joking with them. You know, they've won thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in prizes because as a team, they are playing these CTFs. They get better. They train each other. There's a team out of Carnegie Mellon, the PPP. They win a lot of things. There are a couple teams out of Korea, China, and there's a team in the U.S. called Samurai. Really big team. Probably folks around here are on that team, but you know, they share knowledge. They practice, they set up events to train and practice, and they prepare. They don't just show up with a fresh version of Kali Linux and then just go to, you know, just start working from there. They've got their tools already set, they're tuned. They have organization and structure. And all of those things I just said is exactly how you should be doing an assessment. You should have organization and structure and logging. And that's why I think that if you take this seriously and you use this as a training tool, you get better at your real job. So non-technical vignettes. Anybody here do escape rooms? One? A few? Oh, man, I thought it'd be more. If you do a lot of escape rooms, anybody do geocaching? Geocaching. All right. Weird. The red teamers are doing this stuff. All right. So geocaching, they're just puzzles. They're puzzles. They're all over the place. You take a GPS, you get some coordinates, you solve the puzzle, you find a thing. When you do that over and over again, you see common techniques. When you go to the site and you get close to where the geocache is hidden, if there is a guardrail there, probably going to be like, you know, in the curve of the guardrail. If you're in an escape room, right, and they have this whole, you know, facade and storyline, but you see that over here, there's a lot of scratches on the wall, or, you know, this drawer looks like it's loose, right? You see these patterns emerge, and that helps you. The more you do it, the more you recognize those patterns, it helps you solve it faster. Same thing with CTFing, same thing with doing assessments. You see patterns over and over again, you recognize them, and you can get to the solution by doing that practice. And I don't note taking, I already spent a lot of time on that. Terminal screens, I didn't mention that one. You can, if you do this professionally, you should have a setup that doesn't require you to go out of your way to have these things in place, if that makes sense. So, the terminal screens, when you launch a terminal, you should already have login enabled. You shouldn't have to run a command for that. So that should be in your RC, you know, whatever shell you use. If you also, you should have that those terminal screens written as they're happening, not when you close the terminal, because you could lose it all. Web request should automatically be going through a proxy so that you can record that. Network traffic, as soon as you might have a script that says go time, and go time script starts TCP dump. and it starts saving off PCB dump 100 megs at a time. So you have a bunch of files when you're done. So these things you want to have automated in order to not forget about having them live. And all these things I would say are important for your CTFing. They're important for your engagements. And then socializing teamwork. This is my favorite part about CTFs. I have friends that I've made just because we met at a conference and we played a CTF, and then we became friends, and then we flew to Europe together. Then we traveled through Europe after the CTF. So it's a great opportunity to find other people that have similar interests. You need to know who your team is. A lot of this stuff I relate back to red teaming. If pen testers can sometimes just be a solo, do an engagement by yourself, you write the report. When you work on a team, things are a little bit different, but you need to know your team. You need to know what their skills are. So if I have my friends and we're playing a CTF, I know who's going to be the reverser, right? I know who's going to be the web guy, right? My friend who's a bug bounty guy, he's going to be the web. My friend who is he's a low-level dev. He loves Arty. He's going to take those challenges. Same thing with your real team. Know where those strengths are, because depending on the situation, you might call on them as needed. You can learn together as a team. You can leverage that expertise, and then you just have good bonding. One of the things that you actually have to go out of your way, especially in our field, is just communicating effectively, because things can be stressful. And we live in a world where on our systems you probably have 14 different ways to communicate, and you're getting notification, it's buzzing, and you're on target, and stuff's happening. You need to be able to effectively communicate with the rest of your team. And you kind of have to work on that. Some people they don't like being bugged when they're sitting there and they have an exploit shell and someone over here is chattering in their ear. They'll freak out, right? And so kind of working through that and having patience with each other and knowing how people's personality is very helpful. Post CTF, look at write-ups. Even if I don't attempt a challenge, I will take the description, any hints or whatever, as well as the files and the binaries, and I'll save that off. Because somebody might later create a write-up and share it somewhere. And then if I have that original binary file, I can follow the write-up and kind of learn from it. Video walkthroughs, there's lots of video walkthroughs, right? IPSC is very famous for his walkthroughs on Hackbox challenges. A lot of learning there. Very similar to what we saw with Simon and the Jupiter rockets. Tooling, if you had to write a script that you think might be useful, again, you want to have some organization to save that off. And then that self-improvement, really look at yourself and where your weaknesses are, and go out of your way to try to make up those weaknesses. Because I told you right now, like web, I don't really like that much. I'm not the best at web. I like networks, right? Better. I like pivoting through a network versus just trying to get that initial access on some broken web application. So in conclusion, I think a lot of folks have seen CTFs with SANS. SANS, what do we do at the end of most 5-day courses? We have a CTF. Why do we do that? Because that reinforces all the knowledge that we just went through days 1 through 5. And that some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, some people can just read something and they got it. But most people, they learn best through experiential learning. And experiential learning is when you are up against a challenge and you are applying knowledge that you've gained. So that's why a lot of SANS courses, we have that day 6 CTF. It also takes you out of the context that you learned it in and puts you in a little bit of a different context to see if you can apply those skills. There's an old taxonomy called Bloom's taxonomy. And as you go higher up in your level of knowledge, being able to apply something you learn in a different situation is one of the highest levels, because you're able to extrapolate those skills and put them elsewhere. And then talk about some of the technical skills, non-technical skills, and of course, just that analysis when you're done. Spend some time. You're probably going to be exhausted at that point, but then spend some time to to really go back through your notes.
All right. Thank you very much, Barrett. Round of applause.